My guest tonight is none other than the super talented Hugh Stewart. Hugh is known for his intimate and candid portraits of famous people, a career spanning 30 years and counting, and capturing images, among others, of Johnny Cash, Michael Caine, Jude Law, Nicole Kidman, Paul Newman, Naomi Watts, George Clooney, Matt Damon, and of course my favourite, Clint Eastwood. Hugh's portraits have been hung in the National Portrait Galleries in London and Canberra, and Hugh is currently on the Gold Coast, commissioned to work on Baz Luhrmann's biopic of Elvis. A career spanning more than 30 years and many, many stories to tell. Please welcome Hugh Stewart. Welcome, Hugh.
Hi. Hi.
How was
Thank
that?
you for having me.
Is that okay?
Yep. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yep.
Yeah, no, all good. Thank you for having me.
We haven't talked about your farming career or anything like that, but we'll get onto that one.
Right. Well.
So first of that was my little introduction to you. Let's just go quickly into who is Hugh Stewart. I mentioned there all of the celebrities. So is that, and I understand you got started in photography when you picked up a camera, started taking portraits of mates when you were living, when you'd moved from New Zealand, went to the UK and captured some imagery there and also captured some imagery in New York. Is that where your love of photography came from?
Yeah, that's a kind of condensed version of a long story. But yes, it's true. I was brought up on a farm in New Zealand, and then I left and ended up in London, where I kind of pursued photography a little more fervently, and ended up in Australia with a portfolio of images from London of just friends of mine from basically living in a squat in London and then living in New York. I ended up in London, and then I was probably arrogant enough, that I went straight into Vogue with my portfolio, and I got commissioned. So my first ever job was for Australian Vogue. And then things sort of went downhill fairly quickly from then. And I sort of clambered my way back up to working regularly. But that was the kind of the beginning of the story. But yeah, fundamentally, I've taken, similar pictures all of my career, similar sorts of, the same things have interested me.
So you're in London around the time when, let's face it, the Sex Pistols and those sorts of bands are around, the influence of rock and roll. Was that present for you?
I never saw the Pistols. I never got to London until like 1981. But, I grew up in New Zealand, and there was a big music scene in New Zealand, and I saw the Clash and all those sort of bands then. So yeah, that was a big motivating thing for going to London, was music, really, and getting out of Auckland, which was, it was just a bit small and provincial at the time.
Yeah. Back then it was a smaller place than it is now.
Yeah, it was a very different place. It was before Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. So speaking of that, you moved from stills and you start to work then in the movie industry. You are now also producing and directing your own.
Yeah, sort of. Look, I've always been a photographer. I started, I started in Sydney, and then I moved back to London, worked in London. While I was working in London, I started, getting work in New York. So for a long time, I traversed between the two, and then ended up living in New York for years. And then, for a long, long, long time was just a sort of slave to the whole thing, where I was never home. I was on airplanes the whole time, and I was traveling around. And then, about 15 years ago, I landed up back in Sydney more permanently, and that's where I am now. And then somewhere, along the way, as we sort of transitioned to digital, and then as people started wanting more and more content, I started making little films and directing the odd TV commercial and stuff. But still, I'm fundamentally, a photographer, and that's what I love doing. And, I find the whole process of making TV commercials and stuff, there are too many other people involved, and the process is too long. I've kind of lost interest in it by the time the clients come back after the fourth edit saying that they want to change things again, you know. So yeah, I enjoy it, but it's not my main, you know, focus. Just,
as clients, we can be a little bit picky too, and
oh,
not
look,
really.
I don't mind that, and I'm used to working for ad agencies, all that sort of thing. But I do love photography, and you know, I don't feel that I've, you know, at no point have I ever really lost interest in it, and that's, you know, that's true right up to, you know, today. You know, today I'm taking pictures, and I loved what I was doing today.
Okay. Let's talk about today. So you're on the Gold Coast and you're shooting for or with the biopic for Elvis.
Well,
And
look, I've
part
had
of
a
that
long, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Carry on.
no, I was just going to say,
Well, I was
part of
just
that
going to, yeah,
process.
look, I've had a long relationship with Baz Luhrmann. I started working with him before he made Romeo and Juliet. And I was living in New York. He was in Australia. I don't know how we ended up contacting each other. Well, he contacted me, and he and I worked together. He flew Leonardo out to Australia. This is before Romeo and Juliet was even financed. He flew Leonardo out to Australia, and he flew Natalie Portman out to Australia, who was being considered for Juliet. And he and I made a series of stills and a Super 8 film together of the two of them. And a few other actors, and he, you know, and they recorded sound, they did all this sort of stuff. It was over a 2 or 3 day period. And that film and those stills were then edited together and you know, audio put to it and a sort of rock and roll soundtrack. And that's what he used to present to, I think it was Fox that ended up financing it. That's how he got the film off the ground. So he and I have kind of worked together since then. I've worked in some form or another on almost everything that he's done. A couple of Chanel commercials, Moulin Rouge, Australia, all sorts of things. We made music videos together. We did a whole bunch of stuff. But and then on this occasion, he was making Elvis up in Queensland, and prior to COVID, they asked me if I would, you know, if I could come and do a couple of weeks on it, just to, you know, to do sort of my interpretation of what they were shooting. And then after the whole lockdown thing, they asked me, because they couldn't bring anyone else from over. So usually they'll bring 2 or 3 photographers on, and, you know, Annie Leibovitz and different people have come at different times on different films, and they'll sort of shoot. Anyway, this time they were like, look, nobody else is going to be able to come. Would you consider doing the whole thing? And then because I love the script, I love the whole story of Elvis, you know, that I was happy to do it. So I've basically been in Queensland now for 2 months, and I'm going to stay through to the end of the film. And what I'm doing is, I mean, I can't talk too much about it because we've all signed NDAs, but I'm shooting sort of behind the scenes. So basically now that, you know, the digital camera, movie cameras, images are so good that they can pull stills from that. So the job of a traditional film stills photographer doesn't exist in quite the same way anymore. So what's interesting is that we've recognized that early on this film. So, and usually the camera's in the best spot anyway. So you're fighting with them, and you're fighting with, you know, camera operators and stuff. So the cool thing about this is that they'll still pull some stills from the video camera, and then I've got my own perspective on the film that I can shoot. And then I'm shooting a bit of video, you know, because I'm so close to the action, and because I know Baz, I can get in there and shoot stuff that maybe other people can't. And then simultaneously to that, there's an always on, which is what I normally do, is they'll have a couple of days set aside where they do a thing called a gallery shoot, which is where you'll do the poster. So on this one, what I did is I've kind of created a Ponzi scheme out of the budgets for all of these things, and which enables me to stay here for as long. And I'm shooting the gallery as we go. So every day that we're shooting, I have a studio set up next to on set on the soundstage. And the ADs bring the actors over to me, and I'll shoot them, you know, so that way I'm getting far more stuff than you would get if I was just doing a 2-day gallery shoot, and it's much less impact on the actors. Like, you know, we don't have to call them in. You know, Tom Hanks doesn't want to come in on a weekend, you know, and go through makeup and stuff. So yeah, it's great. I'm loving it. It's amazing. That's all I can say.
And your comment before, you said there's normally a couple of different photographers that will come in. Is that because they have different vision, different eyes, and see things differently, or they have different skill sets?
I think it's just different perspectives, and Baz has got relationships with other people, you know. Yeah, it's just, I think it's interesting to get different, you know, I mean, the thing is that they want so much material now, you know, when you publicize a film, that it's great to have different perspectives, or, you know, I mean, the whole thing's about content now, isn't it? That's like the magic word. So, yeah, this way we're just creating, you know, God knows what it's all going to be used for. There's just a myriad of things, from the posters right down to GIFs and Instagram stuff, everything. So, yeah, that's basically where I am now. I'm now a resident on the Gold Coast, although this weekend I managed to finally, I hadn't seen my family, my wife and kids, for 2 months because of this, because Sydney has been considered a hotspot. But I've managed to get a border pass. So this week, in fact, when this finishes, I'm driving back down to Byron. I've been able to spend a few days with the family in Byron, and now actually the borders are opening on the 1st of December. So I'll probably come and go a bit more from the set over the next few months. Certainly over weekends, I'll probably go home.
Yeah, it's a great chance for you to catch up with someone you haven't seen for a while, and particularly family as well.
No, it's good. I think they were getting a bit used to me being away, so it's good to remind them. I think they quite like it, to be honest.
We also have quite a lot of people who are really interested in gear. So we have a session in these calls, which basically what's in your bag. So when I first met you, you were using D810s, and you've now got a Z7 and a Nikon Z6 II on order. Do you want to talk through the transition to go from the digital SLR and what you've seen and noticed by moving to the Z series camera?
Well, it really came about because I'm shooting on set, you know, and as quiet as the D800 series are, they're not completely quiet, you know. So, and I don't want to put the camera in a box. I mean, those days, that's just really old school. Those days are gone. And so I needed a mirrorless camera that I could shoot on silent. And I got put onto you, and I ended up getting the Z7. And from immediately, I loved it. You know, it's very sharp. They're great in low light. You know, we're shooting in really low light. I'm shooting at about 1,000 ISO most of the time, and quite often wide open on the lenses. And it's just phenomenal. I'm just getting, I love it. They're great. So now I shoot in the studio, the little studio I had set up. I shoot on the D800s there because, I don't know, it's easier, they're heavier. I hold them in my hand differently. You know, I've got different lenses and stuff on them. But anything that I'm doing, especially while we're recording sound, I'm on the, and I also sometimes because I am shooting quite often, I'll be sitting under a crane, or I'll be stuck in a corner, or I'll be, lying down at someone's feet. I can shoot through this, hold it up and look through the screen, and I can use that touch screen thing too, I've just realized as well, which is unbelievable. And then I've got the Z6 set up so that I can shoot video. I can just turn it. I mean, the secret is that I shoot everything on automatic, and then I just play with the plus and minus on the exposure to get it right. So I'll shoot on aperture priority, but then I've also got the Z6 set up, which Chris, you set up for me, and I can flick that across onto video mode without, onto manual and onto video, and then I can shoot. I think whatever it shoots at 25 frames a second or something. I mean, it's great. So
it's awesome.
Yeah, so I see someone's asking me about lenses. Yeah, so I shoot on the Z series lenses, and occasionally on lenses that I don't have a Z series for, I have that little adapter, and I use my other Nikon lenses, which is also, it's great. Yeah. I mean, look, I never used to shoot on zooms very much. I didn't like them. And then just as I've been working on this movie, this is the first time I've ever been on a movie for this long, so I've had to feel my way through it. I've got a, and I also wanted to put a bit of a perspective on it that was a bit different and make it look quite modern. So I'm shooting quite a lot on a 14 to 24 zoom. And then actually, even though I've always resisted, I went and bought a 70 to, no, I've got a, what have I got? I've got a 70 to 200, and I've got a 24 to 70, which they're actually so handy, and they're fast, and I've kind of come to really love them. They're great.
Yeah, it's fun.
There you go.
It's been fun to watch you actually go through that transition too. I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic. Look, it's still about what you're pointing it at, you know, but there is something great about, I love rich photographs in low light, you know, that are sharp, and I can shoot like that. I mean, I could probably rack the ISO up far more, but I'm a bit conservative with that.
So that's been a change for you. Let's talk about 2020, and we talk about changes in 2020. Your plans were probably thrown into a bit of disarray. And I'm very much one of those people that think of the glass as always half full. And I always think about these negative times that we've been in, but also the positives that come out of it. How have your plans changed in 2020? Were you supposed to be overseas? Were you traveling? Or was this always a base for you?
Look, I don't travel as much overseas as I used to. I mean, I'm sure I would have. I mean, I still do a few times a year, but I'm nothing like I was. So that wasn't really a change. I mean, I kind of enjoyed it, I have to say. I mean, we're lucky, aren't we? We have a roof over our heads, you know, and I could afford to sort of, you know, get into cooking and stuff. But I was, you know, so we were at home. I was thinking about making sourdough, you know, I'm not really, but I was getting to that point. And then I came up with this idea, like for a little while now ago, I started doing this thing where I started doing these pop-up portrait studios, because I shoot a lot of, you know, like kind of slightly well-known people, I suppose. But what I love about photography is that I think it should be quite democratic, and especially portraits. And so I always had this idea of, you know, I liked the idea of having like a little portrait studio that anybody could come and get their portrait taken. And so I started doing these pop-up portrait studios where I'd just set up in an empty shop or at a function or something and doing them. And they became kind of a thing. And then I just before the whole lockdown thing, I'd done a big one for Vogue, you know, where they had their 60th or 40th, I think it was their 60th birthday. And because I've worked for Vogue for so many years now that, you know, I did this pop-up portrait studio for them with all the, you know, all the good and the great in Sydney and whatever. And I'd just done that, and then we went into lockdown, and then I was like thinking of things to do, and I thought, well, you know what, I could actually do portraits on FaceTime and, you know, have my backdrop set up that I use for my pop-up portrait studio, and always there's a chair involved in this sort of motley background that I painted. And I thought, well, I could figure out a way of putting that was right. This is how it came about. I came runner-up in the National Portrait Prize in Canberra, whatever it's called. So I didn't win it, but I came second, and I won this like big ESO monitor, which I thought I've got nothing to do. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't use it. Occasionally I might use it as a monitor on a studio job. Anyway, the first day of the lockdown, this monitor turned up. So I had this monitor, and I was like, and then I thought, you know what? I could actually use that to make FaceTime portraits, but acknowledge that they're FaceTime. So what I did is I set up my little studio with the chair, and the chair that somebody would normally be sitting on, I put the monitor on it. And figured out with my kids, I got them off their computer games for a couple of seconds and got them to FaceTime me. I was set up out in the garage where I made a little studio out there next to the house, and I figured out how to do it. And then I figured out at the time that it looked better in black and white than color, because I hadn't really calibrated the screen and I didn't know how to. And then I thought, this looks quite good and I've got nothing else to do. So I put it on Instagram. I said, look, you know, if anyone wants to do a portrait, you know, and then I just got inundated. And I did, like, over about 3 weeks, I did, I think maybe 350 of them. And it was amazing. And it made me realize that what I thought, you know, at the time I thought, well, I'm compensating, you know, I'm compensating for not being in the room with somebody by doing it this way. And then it sort of became apparent to me that 99% of those portraits, as much as I might have liked to think I would never have got around to going and taking, you know. Anyway, even people, you know, that were down the street that I did it. And so I realized that really it's kind of opened a door into another legitimate way of making images. And the thing about often with portraiture, it's about access as much as anything else, quite often. And then so then I ended up, you know, I did Jacinda Ardern, I did all these people as a result of it. And then I started getting work. so then like Vogue, you know, and these different magazines, and then like advertising people started calling up and going, look, we've got no way of, you know, creating content, but you're doing this thing, you know, do you want to do it? So I ended up, you know, I would change the backdrop, and then I would, so, you know, it was quite funny. I've just finished this whole, it's not out yet, but in the end, you know, I did a whole series of influential people around the world for Vogue, right? Like we were on set doing night shoots here on Elvis the other night in the middle of a cane field, and I was in the producer's trailer doing a FaceTime portrait with Jane Goodall, you know, the you know, I had it set up. I had my phone. I was hotspotting on my phone. You know, I mean, and that's the thing. They were never going to fly me to London to shoot Jane Goodall. You know, I didn't. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people I did know, pretty interesting actually, like people and person that started Black Lives Matter, all these people, and you know, so it came to that, and then, but the whole thing that I found interesting was that I wanted to acknowledge that it was on a screen. I mean, it's very easy to take a screenshot of a picture and, you know, it just looks like a bad quality photograph. But if you actually step back and make a point of the fact that it is a FaceTime picture, to me, that was quite interesting. And also I found quite intimate, you know, especially during the whole lockdown thing when people were feeling quite vulnerable, they had fuck all to do, you know, so they were quite into it. And it was kind of interesting as a result of that. I had people booked in. So every day I would have this list of the people, and every half an hour I would do somebody else. And then eventually it got so crazy I was doing them every 15 minutes. But during the height of the whole lockdown, when the whole world was sort of in union, not one single person rescheduled. Like everybody had it. And then I could tell that as schools opened up and things started to get back to normal, especially in Sydney to some degree, in the first time, you know, people would be like, oh, I can't do Wednesday at 10 o'clock. Can I now change it? And that's when I realized the project was sort of done. So then I finished.
We talked before, and I made a comment, and you sort of disagreed to an extent, but I always thought that would have been a less personal way than when you're sitting in a room with someone with a camera. But you said it was actually more personal, or had a tendency to be more personal.
Well, I don't know. Look, I had totally different experiences, but there was something quite interesting, you know, just about like I'm in my little dark garage, you know, and you're sort of quite connected to that person that it's a bit like this now, you know, you don't feel like usually when I work, you know, and if I'm commissioned by somebody to do it, there's a bloody team of people there. You know, I've got an assistant and a digi operator, and if it's for a magazine, there's a stylist and hairdressers and makeup artists and all these things. And to some degree, they impact on the shoot. You know, they do. I mean, they would argue that their impact is, you know, a positive thing because the person might look better, but quite often I feel that sometimes, you know, that, which is also leads me to another interesting point, is that all these magazines closed down over COVID and everyone was lamenting it. But my thing is, because I don't think you should ever look backwards, but I also feel that like a lot of those magazines, they've done their time. Like, you know, their whole thing was about imposing how they think somebody should look on them. So they would turn up at their house, they'd restyle their bloody house, they'd dress them, they would tell them, you know, and eventually you're not really taking a very authentic picture of somebody. You're taking a picture that the magazines, you know, the way that they see them. And I think, you know, it kind of works for our generation, but I've got kids and they're not interested in that. Do you know what I mean? Like they can spot something that's not authentic from a mile away. And so, you know, so to some degree, those things have dissipated during the whole COVID thing. It's just sped up the process. So I don't know where I started with this, but that's where I've ended up.
Well, you know, I'm going to share my screen now because I want to just talk through some of the images. And I had an order which we were going to talk about. But the thing I love about this is it doesn't matter. We can do whatever we want. So just allow me to share my screen and we'll start talking to some of those images. And we're going to sort of skip some of the celebrity shots we had originally, and we'll jump into, let me just change this, and we'll jump into the portraits first. And there we go. And then you can talk through those portraits a bit later, because I think this is interesting to keep talking about this. Are you seeing my screen okay with the presentation?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, good. So this is, no, you mentioned this is a shoot for OPSM.
Yes. Yeah, that was just
Now,
yeah, sorry, carry on.
no, I'm just interested. It's a very funny process for me to think about how OPSM would want to create a piece that's shot on a digital device, or sorry, using a digital device being a TV screen essentially, and the medium that's used to capture this is quite interesting. But this is your garage?
No, that's in our house. But
Oh,
the stool and the screen are in the house, in the garage, in my little studio. And then yeah, that was just like they just needed content, you know, while they weren't able to make any, and they were like, look, we'll pay you this money if you can we'll send you some glasses and you know, just do whatever you want. So I just put the glasses around the house and got one of the kids. I was in the garage taking the picture, and one of the kids was holding a camera phone in the house, pointing it. I was telling them what to do. So it was pretty lo-fi.
are they actually the
There was a
glasses
whole
you're wearing
series
now?
of them. Yeah, sorry, that's my
Are they the
daughter's.
glasses you're wearing now?
Oh, they could be, yeah, because part of the deal was that they gave me some free glasses. And then they sort of tried to balk at it because my prescription is for, like, you know, trifocal glasses, which makes it even more expensive. But no, they were good. They came through.
These are awesome.
But yeah,
I
I
love
think
this.
they are the glasses. Yeah. Excuse me.
I specifically like this one.
Yeah, I don't know what that must be, just stuck on a door or something at home, I think.
That's great. And probably while we're all working from home or we're stuck at home, we probably do talk to ourselves a little bit more than we used to.
That was that's kind of interesting, actually. So before I came up to work on this film set, I had to quarantine. So I was in quarantine in the Novotel at Brisbane Airport for 2 weeks, and of course I made a conscious decision when I went into quarantine that I wasn't going to resist it, that I was actually going to embrace it, because everybody said, oh, you're going to hate it, you're going to get a room that the windows don't open, all this stuff. And sure enough, so when I checked in, I didn't check in, but you know, they'd bus you in, and then I had to check in downstairs at the hotel before I went into my 2-week quarantine. I got my phone out with a compass on it, and I said to the girl on the desk, I want a room that faces that way, and pointed sort of northwest. And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, I don't care what room you put me in, I just want to make sure it faces that way. So I got a room. So he goes, okay, you can be in that room. So I got a room that had sun all day, which was great. That was the first thing that was good. And then I just thought, well, I'll just set up a studio in the room. And I had all my stuff with me that I was taking up to Brisbane. So I set up a studio, and then that was for like Stella magazine or something. They rang me up and they were like, look, can you do a shoot with Magda Sabritsky? She's in lockdown in Melbourne. So yeah, I did that. It was pretty quick. It probably took 10 minutes. But again, I like the idea that you're acknowledging it, like I stuck that stuff on the wall. I mean, they were like, every day the police would take you out for a walk, and then they'd bring me back to my room, and they'd look at me there and there, and I've got like a full-blown photography studio set up in there with backdrops taped to the walls. And then I was like getting the Brisbane flower markets to deliver me flowers so I could do still lifes of flowers. And then I started photographing my food. So every day I would do still lives of my food. So I was actually pretty busy. I actually kind of enjoyed the whole process. I mean, look, I wasn't there. There were people there who, genuinely had difficulties being there and had, family members in hospital and stuff. I didn't have any of that. But it was an interesting experience. It's quite good for my head. I enjoyed it.
When I looked through these images, I wondered whether you had long conversations with the subject at the other end, regardless of who they are, whether they were in the same situation as you, whether it's like, I just want someone to chat to, I want someone to talk to.
Oh, there's a bit of that. There's always a bit of that. But, other people, yeah, sometimes you do. Yeah, you do. I mean, it's really interesting. You get a bit of an insight into things. I mean, one of the ones that I did but it's about to come out, so I can at least, one of the ones I did was for the person that started Black Lives Matter. And that was interesting to see that somebody who's got such influence over the world and who holds such, has kind of inspired a whole movement, is a person who's gender neutral, who lives in a small apartment in the outskirts of Los Angeles, you know, and because she started a hashtag really that started a movement, you know, has this huge kind of, in a way, kind of power. And then, you know, and in many ways, you know, is more influential than politics and you know, traditional politicians and you know, so you get these little windows into things. I mean, that was, yeah, you do end up having a chat to people. It's quite good. I mean, people are they don't really understand what you're doing. They think that they're doing a Zoom call or something. They don't really, because they don't see that the screen and the backdrop and everything's set up. So, but yeah.
Have you had comments back from some of the people that have now seen them and think, now I know what you're
doing? Yeah, no, people like them. Yeah, I'm kind of done with it now because I'm back out in the real world. And so I've moved on and my head's very much back in right now, you know, taking pictures of people that are in front of my camera. And I'm, you know, so I don't know.
Yeah, this is a period, and almost like a period that you put a full stop to, and now.
Well, yeah, kind of. Look, I'm always open to whatever, but yeah, for now. That was for Vogue. That's like she's the head of the CSIRO, so that was kind of interesting. Like we were allowed to go to the CSIRO, but there was nobody there, just a security guard. And then I put the monitor in and we FaceTimed her and took a picture of her in her lab. So they're all done in one, you know, they're done in one shot. Can't remember who that was, but that was in Central Station in Sydney. That's actually me walking through the background. So I must have got my assistant to click the button. I wanted some people moving in the background and there was nobody coming, so I thought I'd do it myself.
Yeah.
That's Judith Nelson. So she owns a gallery in Sydney. And that was a piece of hers. So yeah, same deal. I set it up and then FaceTimed her.
Did you tell her where she was going to be sitting in?
Well, it's her gallery, yes. And then, well, the truth of this image is that she was actually in the next room because it was a FaceTime series, but she was actually there. But so she was in the next room, so she knew exactly what I was doing. But that's not always the case.
Yeah. We'll go back to the start because I want to start from the start. So this is the series you were talking about before with Vogue. That was the pop-up.
Vogue 60 years. So that's Edward Enfield. He's the editor of British Vogue. And funnily enough, I know him from when I lived in London years ago. He and I used to work together for ID magazine. And I did it like his first ever ID cover. And now he's the editor of English Vogue. And he's been absolutely revolutionary there because he's completely changed the whole dynamic of Vogue and made it more inclusive and far more multi, you know, they're all, you know, he's done it. He's amazing. Anyway, he came out to Australia for something. So actually I just did a FaceTime portrait of him the other day too. I forgot about that. A different one. But anyway, yeah, so that was, I don't know. That was just at that shoot. That's me on the left. And that's that famous model whose name I can't remember.
Yeah. And that's your pre-Elvis haircut.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, well, I got my bloody haircut the other day because Baz Luhrmann decided that I should be in the film. So, which is mainly for no other reason is that there's these really iconic pictures of Elvis and they're taken on the stage at a concert. And the only way that I could take pictures like that was if I was actually in the shot. So I'm going to be in the film, but I got the pictures. So when they were shooting me, I was, you know, holding an old camera, but when they turn around to shoot all the rest of it, I can shoot on my Z7.
Nice.
So they chopped my hair fine. That's Clint Eastwood. That was in Carmel.
Yep.
That was cool, actually. My assistant and I flew down to Carmel to shoot that. I can't remember who it was for. And we got there, and usually what happens is that, you know, there'll be like bloody publicists and all sorts of people involved. And that's right. So then Scotty and I, this assistant that worked for me for years when I lived in New York, he and I, so we arrived in Carmel and I had to ring this person who I assumed was a publicist. I rang them up and turned out it was Clint's wife. And then I was talking to her and I said, look, I've found this field that is really beautiful. And if I could shoot there at the end of the day, you know, that would be great. But then I said, look, you wouldn't have like anything that we could use as a prop. And she said, oh, Clint's got the truck from Bridges of Madison County. You can use that if you want. So she was like, I'm going to leave it for you at the bottom of the driveway and a key will be on the tire, you know, go and pick it up. So I went down and picked it up and drove it down to this field, and then we were waiting around. And then I was expecting the whole, you know, crew still of publicists and people to turn up. And then this like rickety old Mercedes station wagon, like a 10-year or 20-year-old Mercedes station wagon turns up, comes down this dirt road, and out gets Clint, right? And he's wearing like these pants up to his, you know, up to his chest, and this like golfing t-shirt, comes ambling over, and he had a bottle of wine in his hand and a packet of like cheese and crackers. And he came over and he was amazing. And he just, anyway, first thing I said, you're not wearing that golfing t-shirt in this picture, that's not going to work. So I gave him my shirt to wear. So that's from while his mate and I he and I used to sell shirts. We designed this like a blue shirt like that. So I had one on, so I got Clint to take his golfing t-shirt off. And he wore my shirt, and then we did a load of pictures. We did that, and he just told us stories about Sergio Leone and, you know, spaghetti westerns and shooting. He was cool. And then he sort of left, and he goes, oh, just leave the truck back up at the, you know, there's something up the road, you know, just leave it up there. So I just drove the truck back up. That was the end of it. And then 2 days later, Scotty and I flew up to somewhere in Maine, up on the East Coast, and to shoot Paul Newman. And the same deal, I shot Paul. He turned up it was at a theatre company that he was a sort of patron of. He came along, we shot him, he turned up, he was there just wearing whatever, jeans and a cowboy boots or something. And there was a stylist there, she had racks of clothes. He's like, no, I'm not wearing any of those. So what's wrong with what I'm wearing? So I got these great pictures of him. And then we went back to New York, and about a week later, we were shooting some celebrity chef in the meatpacking district. I can't remember his name. Like, he turned out to be an okay guy, but he turned up with, seriously, 6 black SUVs and a bunch of publicists and like a whole, and we were just like, what does that say?
Yeah, a guy like Clint Eastwood, you know, turns up in whatever.
Yeah.
The big question is, did he leave you the bottle of wine and the cheese and crackers?
No, we don't. Yeah, I don't know if we drank the wine, but we certainly ate the cheese and crackers with him, actually. Yeah, he actually offered to help us clean up. He was like, you need a hand to pack up. Because I must have had some strobe, and I had a load of gear with me. There's probably a little bit of strobe in that picture, actually. So we had a bit of gear.
Does somebody like Clint say, no, look, you know, I'd like a photo of this or that, or did they try and direct you a little bit? Or
he doesn't care. No, no. Well, that was on film, you know, so he wasn't seeing it, what we were doing. No, and he did something, and that's right, he did something. He turned away and he looked back, and I got this picture really quickly, and he goes, digital guy wouldn't have got that. That was digital. Yeah, that's right, I just remembered that. Anyway, yeah, he was cool.
One of my favourite men.
That's Miranda Kerr. Can't remember who that was for. That was in like a mental hospital. Probably shouldn't say that. Wow. In somewhere in Sydney. We just used it as a location. It's a nice portrait though. I shot her loads of times. Different things. It's not much more. Oh, that's Wendy Whiteley, Brett Whiteley's wife. She's cool. She's given up ciggies now, but she, very opposite of Miranda Kerr.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I really like that the contrast here, and
a bit of a juxtaposition between the two of them. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's this beautiful moment that's going on.
One's a lot cooler than the other.
Yeah. But I wonder what's going on here. I mean, she looks like she's just about to give you a bit of a talking to, like.
No. I don't know why she's wearing dark glasses. I'm not sure. But I was at her house photographing her for something. I photographed her a few times, so I kind of semi-know her. And that was shot on film, I think. That was shot on a Rolleiflex. think it was shot on a twin lens Rolleiflex, because you can see it's sharp there, and then it's, yeah, pretty wide open too, I'd say. Yeah. Ian McCallum. That was for some American magazine, but I shot that in Australia. But I first shot him, I went to, I was living in New York, and when they were shooting Lord of the Rings, Vanity Fair was the only magazine that was given access to the set. And so I was working for Vanity Fair quite a bit in those days, and they flew me out to Australia, I think, to New Zealand. I'm from New Zealand, so it was great. I think I went out 3 times to 3 different locations and did portraits of all the cast. Then this would have been a few years later when I shot Ian again, but I had already shot him before.
Can I ask you a question about posing, and how do you get, like, the Clint Eastwood stare almost, and then, you know, you've got this posing. How do you talk to someone like Ian and say, all right, give me this look? Or do you just say, just be natural? And
no, I just let it go. I'm not into torturing people to get good pictures. I really would rather take 20 bad ones and then get a great one. And so I just sort of sit there and, you know, part of it, I quite like just having a chat with someone. And I mean, the nice thing about digital to some degree now is that they can see what I'm doing. So I usually shoot tethered to the computer, you know, and I'll set something up and they might have a look. I'm also really quick. I'm fast. I don't fuck around. So, you know, I'll even something simple like that, I'll usually have figured it out before they get in there. I will have lit it. I will have done some tests with my assistant sitting in and figured out, and then he'll get in there. I'll make a couple of adjustments. I might bring a black in further on the side just to give me a bit more contrast, and then I'll shoot it. And then I don't hide the screen. I let them have a look at it, and usually they like it, or they get an idea of what I'm doing. And then, yeah, then you get great pictures. And then, you know, I can tell when they start to lose interest.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, there's no secret to it really.
Essentially, they'll almost tell you the pose they want by getting into that pose themselves.
Oh yeah, I just think even if it feels awkward, I think when you start to over-direct people, you ruin things to some degree, because you start fixating on, you know, where their elbow is. And the minute quite often when a picture's not working, I'd rather just get the person to walk around and sit down. I mean, some people are really awkward in front of a camera, but I think you have to sort of embrace that awkwardness. That can be actually that the fact that somebody feels awkward can actually look quite great. And then if it's just not working, rather than torture the person, like move your arm a little bit and just move it, I'd rather just stop for a minute, get them, you stand up, you know, walk around, have a glass of water or something and sit down again. And 9 times out of 10, picture will just happen naturally. And then I guess because I've been doing it so long, you know, I've got a pretty good sense of what I think looks good. I'm not always right, but, you know, so.
Speaking of a glass of water.
Oh, that's Kathy Freeman. Yeah, that was out at Broken Hill for In Style magazine. So that's kind of interesting, actually. There was a whole series from that. So that fundamentally was a fashion shoot. So, you know, she's styled by the magazine. But then I just was, you know, didn't want to feel like a fashion story, like a real fashion picture. So we were just out in Silverton, out past Broken Hill, and I mean, the light's amazing, the landscape's amazing, she's lovely, she was great. We went out there for a couple of days, so we were staying in shitty motels out there, so we got to know her quite well. And that was just one of a big series of pictures.
Yeah, there was a wonderful series of this, and I actually struggled with which one I would select to show, because there was a real wonderful series of photos from Kathy.
Right, yeah, but I like that. I haven't looked at that picture for ages. It's actually quite good. Yeah.
You happy with that one?
Yeah. Oh, that's Roger. That was quite funny because that was in a hotel in, hang on, somebody's just texted me from the set. Yeah. That was in a hotel room in Melbourne when the Australian Open was on, and I had to go and shoot him for something. I think it's Vogue. And my first idea was I wanted him in bed watching the gambling channel, like he was, you know, betting on something. And then he was kind of on to me from that minute. And then he's going, when I was first when I was first getting my picture taken, some guy asked me to get into bed and take the picture, and then they ended up I look gay, or I don't know. He was funny. So he goes, I'm not getting in the bed. I'll just sit on the bed.
Yeah.
So but it turned out to be quite a good picture. I think
Yeah,
might have had something to do with the picture, because I know we had to have champagne in there. Yeah. But he was, that was a typical example. He's got like 10 minutes. I get let into the room. I set the picture up with somebody else, and then he comes in, hello, you have 2 minutes to chat to him. He's got like a whole entourage of people with him. I'm like, sit on the bed. I shoot whatever I can shoot. I think I only did one setup. And then I'm like, off you go, mate, I'm done. And they're like, oh man, that was great. That was quick. I thought this was going to be torturous. So, that's how the best part of that actually is my brother-in-law is Italian, and he loves Roger Federer, and he's a really good tennis player. And so a big part of that day is I said to my brother-in-law, come with me to Melbourne. You'll meet Roger Federer. And he was like, oh man, that would be amazing. Because my brother-in-law used to play junior tennis in Italy, and I think he might have played Roger or something. I don't know. There was something. Anyway, I did the picture, and then I introduced him to Roger, and then they had a big chat that took longer than it took me to take the picture about tennis. So that was the story behind that. Mm.
So let me understand. Do you get to go into the room first and scope out where you want to stand and where you want Roger to be and get your settings right, or do you walk in and
No. I go in. That's not even his room. That's just a room that the hotel gave us to shoot in. So yeah, I'll go in first, set the picture up, figure out exactly what I'm doing, and then they bring him in. So by then, I'd lit that. There was like some sort of light over here somewhere. Probably a little, a flash with an octobank or something, a small octobank, and I just like to fill it with flash a little bit. I hate it when it looks like flash and it looks like strobe, but I like when I balance daylight and strobe. So I use the strobe almost like a reflector.
One of my favorites.
Oh yeah, that's Elise Perry, that cricketer. Doesn't she play cricket and something else?
Soccer, yeah.
Yeah. No, she's cool. That was for like Marie Claire magazine. That's in the members stand at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Yeah, and then I shot her again recently, actually, for GQ magazine.
I think about the convention of the members stand, and you think about all of the history of the members stand, and traditionally women weren't allowed in there at all. And
no, you're right.
Yeah,
she's in there in singlet. Yeah. It's actually kind of a good picture. I haven't looked at that for ages either. Yeah. Okay.
It's pretty cool. I looked through all of your images, and I struggled to. It actually took me a long time, because I went through all of your images and I was like, oh, that one's cool. And there's this like rabbit hole of images, and I just sat there looking at your website, and then I went to your Instagram, and it was really cool. It was hard to select images.
Yeah, but I was kind of lucky, because I got going at a time when magazines were king. And there were a lot of magazines in the world. They had a lot of money, and they were commissioning a lot of things, so, and every single celebrity film, films, anything that happened, their first port of publicity was with a magazine. And then there was a sort of myriad of magazines that were all on different standards. And so there were just enormous opportunities in those days of photographing people. Those magazines are gone now. They've finished. So I would never have built up the kind of archive of pictures that I have if it hadn't been for the fact that, there were so many magazines, and that I was lucky enough to be shooting for a lot of them. Don't know how you'd do it now, because you just didn't get the access.
That was what I was going to allude to next was, here's a wonderful start to your career. I mean, this has now changed, and is there any advice you'd give to people to say this is where I would start, and certainly building a portfolio, I think, but then we have those people saying it's very hard to build a portfolio when you don't get the access.
Well, yeah, I think that's the case. It's true. I don't know how I would start out now, to be honest. I'd probably be looking at making films as much as taking photographs, or, I don't know. I'm bad with, I can't really, there's it would have been easier to give advice years ago, but I mean, who knows? The only thing I would say is that, when I was doing those when I was doing those lockdown portraits of people, and one of the people I shot was this guy called Tom Dixon, who, if you look him up, he's probably the most famous designer in the UK right now. He's this guy. Anyway, I used to live in a squat with him in London in the early 80s, and he designs lights and, you know, all sorts of stuff. And he's got restaurants. He's got, you know, in England. He's actually now a Sir, Sir Tom Dixon. Anyway, I did this portrait of him quickly for this FaceTime thing. And I was like, you know, what's happening? How's it going? And he was like, look, this is closed down. My restaurants have closed down. The design companies, you know, all my commissions, that nothing's happening right now. The business is operating at like 20% of what it was. But he said, I fucking love chaos. I love it when everything's thrown up in the air and I have to find something, a way of going forward. And so one of his restaurants, he turned into a soup kitchen. Another one, he turned into a farmer's market. He started a YouTube channel. You know, he just started doing all the stuff that he never would have done. And like, I'm a bit the same. I like it, you know, when your back's against the wall, like when there's, you know, like I'm the same as anybody. Sometimes I think I'm never going to work again, you know, or I'll have a slow period and I think, well, that's it. You know, I've had a pretty good run. It's over. But I quite like this idea, you know, you find stuff to do. Like even in the whole COVID thing, I decided I'm going to open a high street photography studio. So I'm opening in Queen Street in Wallara. We've got a space now, and it's about if I ever get back from Queensland, I'll open it. But yeah, so I've started it's a gallery where I sell my images, not necessarily my portraits. I do all these like still lifes. I'm going to sell those, and then the other half of it is a old school photography studio where you can come in and I will do a family portrait for you, and you will get, you know, you'll pay and whatever it is, it's going to be fairly reasonable. You're not going to be telling me that you want the picture taken over there or that you want me to come to your house. You basically get a Hugh Stewart portrait, and you know, included in the deal, you'll get 4 or 5 signed pictures and the opportunity to buy some more prints. And it's really uncomplicated. It's just one price. You know, like I was looking at those photography studio people, and you know, they're like so ambiguous about what it costs, and it just seems like you're just being upsold all the time. Whereas I just like this idea, and I thought, so, you know, but that was sort of born out of the fact that, oh man, you know, maybe things are going to change. I'm not going to be traveling anymore. You know, I'm going to have to keep working. So, yeah, I'm a bit the same. I quite like it. So in terms of how you're going to get started, I mean, you find a way. If you're that sort of person, you'll find a way.
I think your mates back in the day when you started taking photos of them, they weren't celebrities, they weren't high profile people, but you built a portfolio. So, you know, start with, you know, your local people down the street, or, you know, come up with a niche.
Well, that's what I always say. If you're interested, yeah, I just find a project, go and photograph people, you know, find a project, go and photograph, I don't know, just find something interesting to go and photograph. I mean, the whole thing's about just taking pictures, isn't it? That's the shoot I was talking about with Leonardo at the beginning of Romeo and Juliet. Yeah, and that's just in a back street in Darlinghurst.
So this is that full circle almost back to Baz now where we are with Elvis.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, exactly. It is. Yeah, well, I don't know how long ago it was, 25 years ago or something, maybe longer. Yeah.
Do you have a photograph that you think is your most famous? Like people look at Hugh Stewart, the name, and they look at a photograph, or is there a few that stand out?
No, I don't know. I don't really think about that. No, I mean, I don't know. No, not necessarily. It's interesting. Like when I took that picture, I never really thought anything of it. They're just 2 from a whole series. And now, 25 years later, I suppose some people might say that they're quite iconic. I can this job I'm working on now, this Elvis thing, I think it's going to be so amazing that it will become I'm a big fan of Baz, but this is really an extraordinary film. And the kid that plays Elvis is unbelievable. Tom Hanks is amazing. So so I do feel like right now I'm in the middle of something that is going to be pretty special.
That's nice, eh?
Mm.
We're finished with our slide presentations, and
yeah, but there's plenty. People can look on my website if they want to see it. There's plenty of work.
Yeah. I was going to say that there's your website, going between your website and your Instagram will keep you busy for a couple of hours. We've got a couple of questions here I just want to check. And Ross, is there anything that you need me to? Oh, here we go. So Monique's saying, do you use flash on or off camera?
Off camera usually, but funnily enough, while I've been doing this Elvis thing, I've been looking at lots of old Elvis pictures, and a lot of it's, you know, press photography or it's shot with an on-camera flash. So I've been shooting stuff with an on-camera flash a bit as part of a whole lot of other things, but yeah, but not normally on camera, no. But I'm up for that. I think it looks amazing if you do it properly.
Okay. You're back to now where we're starting to see things changing back to some sort of, I guess, maybe normality to an extent. There's a whole heap of names on your website of people you've taken photos of. Is there someone that you just wish that you could go and do a portrait of, or someone that you wish that you could sit down with and have a cup of tea with?
Who have I not photographed? No, that I want. I don't know. Not really. I don't really think like that. You know, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes, you know, I'll be driving along and I'll look out the window and I'll go, fuck, that's a great picture. And then I make a decision in my head not to stop and take the picture. And I'm always disappointed that I haven't, because then that picture will stay in my head going, oh man, I should have stopped and asked that person if I could take their picture. So that, yeah. But no, I just sort of shoot what comes along to some degree.
Julie wants to
I tell you
know.
who I haven't shot that I would really like to shoot is Maggie Smith, the English actress. Like, I've shot Judi Dench, but I would love to shoot Maggie Smith. But I don't know, that'll happen, maybe.
Julie's got an interesting question here. Who would you get to shoot your portrait?
Oh man, nobody wants to take my picture. I don't know, one of my children.
Isn't that why you become a photographer, so you don't have to be on the other end?
Exactly, so I can hide behind the bloody thing. I mean, that's true, actually. If I really, really, you know, got into some deep psychological examination, it's a way of just sort of, it would have started out like that as a way of kind of hiding, but being in the room, you know, and avoiding getting in too deep. I mean, I think I've improved since those days, but that was probably the beginning.
I remember that, actually, that feeling of going into an event or into a space, and the camera was actually a shield almost from some of those, you know, those big events with those, and you're probably a bit younger and you walk into this event and you're like, oh, that's okay, I'm the photographer, I've got the camera. It almost became a bit of a
yeah, no, it's true. I think it is. I mean, I still hide behind it, but yeah, I'm usually hiding behind it now while I'm pushing in someone's face.
Yeah. So my question to you, what's next?
Well, I'm going to finish this film. I don't know what's coming up. This stuff comes up quite regularly. A lot of stuff I've had to turn down because I've committed to doing this. But look, I'm just like anybody. I just wait around for the phone to ring. And then you know, occasionally if it doesn't ring, I'll try and motivate something myself. I've got long relationships still, like Vogue is a good example. So often, you know, if I see somebody's coming to the car, if I don't know, if I see something that I think might be interesting to them, I'll drop the art director or the assistant editor who I'm friends with an email and say, hey, have you guys thought about doing this? So I kind of make my own work as well sometimes, but basically I'm just waiting around for people to commission me.
What's your statement that you use when you ask someone to sit down for a portrait? Do you have a conversation starter?
Oh, look, the more you do, the more you end up having in common with them. So quite often, you know, I don't know, quite often, you know, you'll have something in common. I've either photographed them before, or I've photographed someone they know, or we've worked, you know, I don't know, you find a way in every time. But it's, you know, it's the same. I just quite like having a chat to people, you know, so you'll, yeah, I don't have any tricks, really. I suppose I do. I mean, I suppose I'm just quite good at, I think I'm quite good at, like, I've been taking pictures for so long and I don't take the same picture over and over again, but I do have in my head exactly what I'm doing. And technically I'm not really thinking anymore. You know, I know that it's going to come out now, and I'm good at looking at light, and I know what sort of picture I want to take. And, you know, it's got easier now with digital as well, as long as I'm in the ballpark with my exposures and everything, I can concentrate on my relationship with the person and not be worrying too much. And then a lot of the time I work with an assistant or a digi operator. So, you know, and I've got a guy that's worked with me, this guy now recently, a guy called Sean Slattery, and he's great. And he is really focused and quite technical and far more, he's just, you know, he'll tap me on the shoulder if I'm getting out of control and say, look, just slow down, you know, wait for the flash to recharge at least, or, you know, stop and have, you know, we'll stop and have a look. I get a bit carried away with making the pictures sometimes.
Well, whatever you do it well, because I know, you know, we only met a couple of months ago now, I guess, but I feel like I've known you for a long time, and I think that's that personable side to you, and having that really assists with, I know, being on the other end of the camera, but also then knowing your craft and knowing how the camera works and not having to think about that, but technically being able to drive it is another element to it. So yeah, it's been wonderful to get to meet you and to know you personally as well. So that's my positive that's come out of COVID, is I've had a chance to meet you and spend some time with you.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise. Yeah, no, it's good. I've had a long relationship with Nikon, so it's actually it's great. And yeah,
excellent.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Stewart, we better let you either get down to Byron or go back to set, depending on what.
No, I'm actually going to drive down to Byron now because my wife and kids are up and they're leaving in the morning. So I'm going to go down and have late dinner with them and stay the night there, and then I'll come back up to set in the morning, and then I'm back.
Nice. Well, I'll wave to you as you go past me on the M1, mate.
Yeah. No, well, it's a pretty good drive from here, actually. But no, listen, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. God, I've just noticed there's a lot of people on there. Thank you. Yeah, I'm probably very inarticulate, but whatever.
That's all right.
Wants to know anything else, they can send me an email.
Yeah, that's right. So
yeah,
and just to reiterate, I'll be sending out an email as well tonight, which will have all of our contact details, or my contact details, on it. If there's any questions you've got from tonight's show, you feel free to reply to me. And certainly if there's any product related questions, I'm more than happy to answer that as well. Don't forget, there's the Nikon Playcation, I guess, photo competition that we've got at the moment, which is really about taking photos in this environment where potentially this time of year we would have been over in Hawaii surfing or trekking the Himalayas. So come up with some great photos there for the Nikon Playcation promotion. And of course, follow Hugh Stewart at all of his social elements. So Hugh, we've got website and Instagram, if you can just quote those for us.
Yeah, there's Hugh Stewart Gallery is my Instagram, and then my website's just hughstewart.com.
Perfect. Thanks, Hugh.
All right.
Thanks for everyone being here tonight. Again, thank you, Hugh. It's been wonderful talking to you. I look forward to catching up with you again very soon. And we'd like to thank everyone for being at Nikon's The Next Chapter.
Cheers. No, thank you very much. All right.
Thanks, Hugh. Take care, mate. Good night. Safe travels down to Byron.
Right. Good night. Cheers.